And I will let our moderator and panelists to take it away.
All right. So hi, my name is Dr. Caitlin Orsini. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology in the Behavioral Neuroscience area. And I am joined by Anna, and I'll let Anna introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Anna Resnack. I'm a third-year PhD student in the developmental area of psychology. I did my master's before coming to this program, and then I did my undergrad at LSU, and I'm really excited to talk to everyone here today.
So I went through a bunch of the questions that were submitted before today, and because I like to be very organized, I kind of grouped them into 8 different categories that I thought that we could go through. And so I'm going to serve as like a moderator and as a panelist. So I'll kind of move through them, try to answer questions, and then Anna, and Anna can provide answers and her input. I think one of the biggest ones, and I just heard a little bit of the last session, but one of the biggest questions that many people had was about having prior research experience and what that looks like in an application or in applying to graduate school. And this could vary across different disciplines in psychology. And so that's why, I can give you my perspective and then Anna can provide hers. But I think across the board, having research experience above all else is going to make you a very competitive applicant, whether that means you need to have, 5 years. I don't think that's necessary, but, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but that's going to really help you craft a cogent personal statement as well when you're talking about why you want to apply to graduate school. What are you curious about? Like, what do you want to kind of discover and work on intellectually? What are the skills that you have that will allow you to do that? All of those things you acquire during research experience. And I know as I am reviewing applications, that is one of the biggest things that I look for. I look at like GPA, I look at what courses you've taken, but what I really focus on is what is your research experience? And it doesn't have to be exactly what my lab does, but it has to indicate to me that you have kind of the basic skills that you can use to, that allows you to have a foundation for coming into the program and building and developing across those 5 years. I'll stop there and let Anna add on. I'm just going to look at some of the specific questions that you guys submitted to make sure I address that.
Yeah. Anna, if I may jump in for a second, I think you'll be a good person to answer this as well. So another thing was from the very first session, I said I was going to save some of the questions for this. Students are very interested in knowing about, doing post-bac versus going straight to, from undergrad to PhD program. And then also how they may be able to look for research opportunities. So if you can also talk about that as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So the first thing is it's important to get research experience, kind of as Caitlin said, because it's different from what you do in a classroom. It's expanded. A lot of it is self-driven, and it's a muscle that you exercise that you're going to be exercising 24/7 as a PhD student. And so there's a lot of ways to get research experience. A lot of it, my first lab, I joined because a professor was just looking for RAs in a class that she taught. She's like, raise your hand, come see me after class if you want to work in my lab. I have positions. It's not always that apparent. A lot of times different programs will have like posting boards. So like UT has Eureka, where people will post different positions and openings. A lot of times if you go to a professor's website, they'll have like an application link. Sometimes you just send out cold emails where you're like, I really liked your class. I think you were cool. What research are you doing and can I help? And a lot of times you are hustling and bustling just to try to finish your undergrad, and you might not have a lot of spare time to do research. Most labs require at least 10 hours of commitment a week. So a post-bac is a really good opportunity to get more detailed research experience. And so that also, you can find job postings like that on like the National Institute of Health website, the National Science Foundation. You can stalk Twitter. A lot of people share opportunities there or on LinkedIn. Or ask your favorite professor, hey, I'm looking for these kind of opportunities. Can you sit with me and kind of describe where I might find more opportunities? And really all of these are just to demonstrate that you have the kind of like self-drive and ambition to think about a question, to want to learn, to like fail your way up to figure out how does science happen. Because it's a lot of like banging your head against a wall until something works. And that kind of persistence is what professors want to be able to speak to in their letters of rec for you. And it's also what professors are looking for when they're reading your letters of rec. Like doing well in one semester is one thing, but reading that a student like went above and beyond like 2 semesters in a row, and like that's a whole different skill set that people are really looking for. And you don't need 4 or 5 years of research experience. A few semesters is typically enough to demonstrate that you have that kind of drive and that you're willing to practice that skill set.
Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily need to do multiple gap years or a post-bac. If you've been working in a lab or working in some research capacity during your undergraduate, but one piece of advice I would have is that if you're a senior right now and you're thinking about, and you haven't had much research experience, then I would start thinking about what are the strategies that you need to take to gain that research experience. And maybe that is you take a gap year. In my personal experience, I went right from undergrad. It was a small liberal arts school, so it wasn't, like UT or kind of these big state universities. I went right into graduate school, but I had worked and worked as a research assistant during multiple different summers. So I had been able to get that experience. They were not paid. It was, but it was that experience that I could then draw from and get letters of recommendation. And there, like Anna was saying, there's a lot of good post-bac opportunities, and through NIH, there are lots of, research institutions that are 1 to 2 years. I think NIH is a 2-year program.
Mm-hmm.
There was a question in the chat.
I can post some links.
So besides the research experience itself, how important are publications and posters at conferences for the application process? I think they're great. And I don't think you need to have publications you don't need to have publications in peer-reviewed journals to get into graduate school. Although I will say, depending on where you're applying, that may, it may differ. So I've had a couple undergrads in my lab who've gone on to grad school, and they have told me that, they know they had no chance at place X because they didn't have any publications. But I don't think it's it's a problem. I think you can write about in your personal statement, and it'll come through in your letters of recommendation that you've had this experience. Posters, I think the same thing applies, but you can also, those are a bit easier to get because depending on where your undergrad is or where you are, there are a lot of like local opportunities to present data. The biggest thing I would say is just advocate for yourself in wherever you are and whatever research position you're in, and tell the person that you're working with, are there these opportunities? Because, you want to make sure that if they are there, that you're able to take advantage of them. So it doesn't ruin your application if you don't have those things. Those things are good, but they're not necessary. I don't think.
Yeah, I'll just add to that really quickly. Like, a very diplomatic way to bring this up in like an interview for a lab or something, instead of saying like, I need a poster for my resume or my CV, you can say like, I really want to see the research process from A to Z. Like, are there pathways for me to do this in this lab? A lot of like UT has undergraduate research week where you can present posters and things like that. Most of those big fancy conferences like prioritize or have like special sections for undergraduate research as well. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I think there's really good ways to kind of ask, hey, like I wanted to practice this skill, like from, working on the data to all the way in. Can I have this opportunity at this lab? Do you facilitate that?
If you're going to be, okay. So someone's asked about personal statement writing. We're going to get to that a little bit later, so I'm going to skip that question for now. Sorry, Andrea, but I promise we'll get there. If you're going to be second or third author on a paper that won't be published for a few years, how do you present that in an application? You can talk about it in your personal statement that it's going to lead to a publication on which you're going to be an author. You can also list it on your CV as in preparation. That's not uncommon. And as long as it's true, right? And if there's a journal that you guys have already targeted, you can even say in preparation for submission to X journal. So, but definitely in your personal statement, when you're kind of talking about some of the researches you've been involved in, you can say this will culminate in a publication on which I am second or third author or whatever. And you can also talk about what your contribution is or was to that project. I'm going to move there's a lot of, like, I have 8 topics to cover, so I just want to move through, but, throughout this, if we don't answer every specific question, like Joanne said, just reach out to any one of us. We'll put our email in the chat, and happy to follow up on these questions. So one other one was that there were several questions about what other experiences that may make you a competitive applicant. This was I mean, it's a good question. I think, the involvement in research is really kind of the thing that I look for the most, rather than lots of other extracurricular activities. I think sometimes I like to see that they've been involved in, some sort of outreach, but I don't think that that's as important as getting involved in research, or if you're going into a clinical program, being somehow, in getting familiar with that process. I do think it's a bit different than when you talk about applying to med schools, where you do have to have a gazillion different things, right? You need to shadow a physician, you need to do all of these things. I don't know how, and Joanne or Anna, you can jump in. I don't think you need to have, all of those different things to really make you stand out. What do you think, Anna?
Yeah. So obviously I'm not admitting PhD students right now, but I am involved in the process. And I hire my own research assistants all the time. And something that I actually look for that I think no one really talks about is I look for retail experience. As someone who myself worked all throughout college and high school, it shows like you have you can think quick on your feet. You are willing to be kind of negotiate, you have that customer service voice, which helps in research presentations. Being able to turn on your customer service voice when you're explaining maybe a kind of boring topic is really helpful. And I have the awards to prove it. I think my time at Trader Joe's really prepared me a lot to be a scientist. so that's something I look for a lot in my students. And I think a lot of people don't want to talk about their experience. It's not directly related. But like your time as a summer camp counselor, your time volunteering, your time, like I said, working in retail, your time working at Burger King, like all of those show that you have a work ethic that can be applied. And it's not so much about having directly related experience. It's about you being able to directly relate your experience. So you need to come up with your own narrative of like, I learned this skill from this experience, and that's how I can apply it here. And just spending the time to meditate on that can really, you can turn anything, you can spin anything you want into something that can be beneficial as a researcher, because we study life, we study people. So all your experiences can be incredibly relevant.
I mean, some other things that, if you have the opportunity, and that you could highlight in your application is like, if you've taken courses in data analysis or in statistics or, programming, those are things that, again, I don't think will make or break the application, but that show, again, that work ethic, that commitment. But they all kind of fold into your preparation for the PhD program. So didn't have a whole lot on that, because really I think I do like the retail thing. I before I went to grad school, I did a lot of customer service, and I do agree. I mean, I also learned I do not ever want to do customer service ever again, but it did prepare me for kind of you always have to communicate, and work with others. And so those are skills that you really have to learn on the fly there. Okay, so the next topic is the GRE. And there were a bunch of questions about the GRE. There was, do you need to take it? How do you study for it? What does optional really mean? This is going to, so for the PhD program in psychology here, it is optional, and that is not like a loaded word. It's optional. And if it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. It does not confer any greater advantage to an application over those that don't have the GRE. More broadly, it's really going to depend on the university. And so what you need to do is, when you're researching graduate programs, which is a separate topic that we can touch on later, you should specifically look for if it's required or not. And there's been, some programs have done away with it and then brought them back. And so you really need to pay attention to those details. And I would actually advise, if you have creating some sort of spreadsheet or way to organize all of the programs that you're applying to, and one of the columns being GRE required, yes or no, because then you'll know. And so it's really going to depend on the requirement of the university. And let's see. Yeah, I mean, I want to say most universities do not require it, but that is not across the board. And so it's really, you're really going to have to research that for a specific program.
I just want to add really quickly to that. I'm going to share a guide at the end of the session that has a organizer that I'm pretty sure that's one of the columns. It's like a free downloadable Google sheet. So that helps. And I also have sections on like how to apply for testing waivers and things like that. But yeah, I got I got 2 points above, I think, the most average score on the GRE, because I was just so mad at it. I didn't study at all. And some people will bring it up in interviews and be like, your math score wasn't good. And I'm like, I'm dyslexic, but now I'm the stats consult. So like, it obviously wasn't predictive. But really it is just kind of like ask around. You can always email coordinators and be like, can you give me some insight? Will this complement my application? Or is it something that's maybe not worth spending my time on if it's not required for the programs you want most?
And, if you choose to take it, how do you study? So, so the GRE, in my perspective, is just you are learning how to take a test, and it is testing your ability to take a test. There are writing components that may be helpful for evaluation. So if you choose to take it, I think there's a lot of helpful, books. I wouldn't necessarily say take a course, because that can be quite expensive, but just, doing practice tests, because it's just testing your ability to take a test, so nothing, I wouldn't go crazy, but that would be my advice. Okay, let me just see. Okay, when do most applications open to apply for fall 2024, and when do they due? They're usually applications. Well, I don't know when they open, but September, yeah. They're usually due November, December. It really depends. Again, in the document that Anna's going to share, there's probably a column of due dates. So I would just, put that in there. But that's pretty, the way that it usually works, and maybe it's already been reviewed, is applications will be submitted, then they're reviewed, and then you usually get some sort of communication about interviews in December or January. And then, the status of your application in February, March, you make a decision in April. That's kind of the general timeline. Okay. How to choose a program. So there's a lot of different elements, and it's also it may vary depending on discipline. So for example, and I'm in the behavioral neuroscience area, so I know the most about kind of that specialty, but for folks that are looking for a clinical PhD, you may want to look at what the training model is. So what is involved in the program? What are the internship requirements? So understanding just the programmatic requirements, and that information will be important for other kind of PhDs in psychology. So what are the course requirements? Is there a qualifying exam? So understanding the model, the training model, and whether that's appealing to you, whether that will work for meeting your goals and objectives. I think one of the most important things to look for is your fit. Not only with the program, but fit with the faculty member or members with whom you're going to be working. We'll talk about this in the next kind of subsection of this panel about how to contact PIs. But you're going to be working with someone or a few people for 4 or 5 years. And so you really want to make sure that fit in that relationship is as good as that can be determined, at that point, right? You never know what it's going to be like when you're, 4 years in, but you really want to make sure that there is that fit there. And you can get a sense of that by contacting faculty members ahead of time, meeting with them. I meet with a lot of students way ahead of application submissions, and talk of them. So if you're going to conferences, you can try to meet with them then. And then 2 other things, and I'm going to let Anna go. So I talked about the training model, fit with faculty, understanding what the fellowship funding situation is like of the program. Is it fully funded? Like, are you fully funded through research assistantships, or do you have to TA every semester. So what are the different fellowships available? So having that information would be, I think for me, that was really important to know. And then you're going to be living somewhere for 4 to 5 years. So location, if you do not want to live in a place, if you don't want to be in a big city, or you don't want to be somewhere very rural, those are things to consider. However, on the other end, it's only 4 to 5 years. So, if it's a really good fit with a faculty member, or it's a really great program or training model, you may not love the area. You could probably put up with that for 4 to 5 years. So those are kind of some of the notes that I jotted down about, I think, things to think about when you're considering programs, but I'll let Anna chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think the only thing to add is think about, remember that a PhD is training. You are becoming an expert learner. And so I've had so many professors who didn't start studying the thing they're famous for until after their PhD, but they had created a foundation of research that helped them to pursue whatever they wanted. So I think there were some questions in the doc about how do you choose what research you want to do. Remember, you are learning to be a researcher. You have a somewhat of a base, but a PhD is becoming an expert researcher. So think about the kind of training you'll get. Like Caitlin said, what kind of courses do you have? What's the qualifying exam? For me, I was I want an advisor who does as many methods as possible because I would like to have a lot of exposure. So that was something that really mattered to me. And you can create a little bullet list of okay, well, if I want to do wet lab work, I really need someone who is currently doing that. That's my non-negotiable, or at least know that a couple people on the faculty have that opportunity. Let's say you really are interested in a certain subject matter and you're okay, I need at least a couple faculty members in that department who study linguistics in particular. And that's something that I think can really help is having that list of okay, what are my top things that I need? And does this program and this person provide it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really, this person and this program, because perhaps, you may be working with one primary faculty member, but there may be someone else that you end up collaborating with, or that's on your dissertation committee. And, to have kind of multiple sources of knowledge, is I think very helpful. So it's fit with faculty, but also fit with kind of the department as well. One thing I just would add is when you're looking at programs, I would look at, what are the requirements for statistic courses, because I think that's really a really important thing to incorporate into your training early on, that not all PhD programs either require or offer. And so it's going to be an important part of your training as you move forward. So that's something that I would definitely consider. Okay. Moving on to contact. This is kind of somewhat related to what we were just talking about, but contacting faculty members and professors. I don't think it's ever too early. I mean, unless you're applying 3 years from now or something, but if you have clearly, you all have started thinking about this process. So I would, it's a good time to start sending out emails. Cold emails is totally fine. I would spend the time looking at these different programs, looking at the faculty members, and then writing, contacting them, asking them, are you taking graduate students for the 2023, 2024 academic year? Because they may be, even though their website says they're not, or vice versa. The reality doesn't always match what's online. We don't always update our website. So asking, and then expressing your interest. And I say this with lots of experience. Make sure you've done your due diligence and read their website, or, you don't have to do tons of research into what the faculty member does. You don't have to read all of their papers, but, put the effort into writing the email to make it sound genuine, and not like you have just copy and pasted between different emails. Because I am happy to take the time to talk with someone for a half an hour about my lab and the possibility of coming to UT. But if I get the sense that it's just, I'm another one on their list, even though I may be, I'm less inclined to do that. So I think you really want to make it sound as genuine as possible. And, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If you're going to a conference that that person might be there, ask them to come by your poster or go by their poster or see if you can meet. I mean, a lot of this is about networking and making sure that when they get your application, they already recognize that name. You've made that contact. And I think that does go a long way. So it's never too early. I wouldn't do it like right before applications are due, because I think that window of opportunity has closed at that point. But so it's good to do that, and to really express interest, and again, but make it, genuine.
Yeah. So in the resource guide I'm going to share a link to at the end, I actually have a template that covers all of those things that Caitlin mentioned. And I think that you can reach out as early as possible, but you may not get answers. They may not know if they're taking students at cycles, because there's budget things. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes besides I just want a student. And so you're most likely to get the most representative answer early fall semester. So August, September, I think is some of the best time to reach out, to be here's my interest. I really like this about your work. Are you accepting students? What kind of student would best complement your lab at this point? That's one of the questions that when I see that, I'm like, whoa, you want to know what I want? Not just that I'm taking someone. And that really shows that you're thinking am I a good fit for you? And so, yeah, I will share that template and stuff, but yeah, it's really good to get that name familiarity, because we're psychologists, familiarity bias. Want people to see your name.
And when you do end up meeting or, chatting with the faculty, and one thing I would also ask is, can I talk to your current trainees, your current grad students, or your former trainees? I always have prospective students talk to my graduate students, over Zoom or whatever, because I know what it would be like for me to mentor a student and what I think that looks like, but it could be very different from my students' perspective. And so, you're also right now you're in an information gathering stage, and those people, their current trainees, are really important sources of information for you. So that's another thing that I would ask when you do, meet with a prospective advisor, that if you could talk to the people that, they mentor and oversee. See, there's a few questions. What if they don't write back? Should you follow up? Yes. I mean, I say yes. I would not follow up multiple times in a week, but I would write an email, let some time go by, and then follow up. I wouldn't let it just disappear into the ether. For me, once an email gets below my line of vision in my inbox, it's less likely to get a response, just due to human nature, and I'm getting a lot of emails. So I do always tell even my students when I'm teaching, just follow up. It's not because I didn't I purposely ignored it. It's just that you're managing different things. So yes, follow up, but within a reasonable time frame. Yeah, and a non-answer can be an answer in itself. So follow up, but if you continue not to get any answer, then maybe, yeah, that's an answer. Let's see. Okay, any other comments on that topic, Anna?
No, I definitely want to speak to the master's since I did have that experience.
Yeah, so I have master's versus a PhD.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so I was gonna do master's versus PhD, talk about letters of rec, and then writing a statement of purpose. So those are the last three
Brilliant.
topics. Okay, so I'll let you take away master's versus PhD because I have strong opinions, but they may not necessarily align with yours. So go for it.
Yeah. So when I was finishing my bachelor's, I applied to like 8 PhD programs and 1 master's as like a backup. And I went on a few interviews for the PhD programs and I actually really didn't find a fit that I enjoyed. And I had worked with grad students who were like, fit is so important. And so even when I did get an offer, I was like, this is not the right topic for me, but I want to stay in research. So I actually ended up doing a master's instead. Now, it is very rare to have a research-focused psychology master's. By and large, masters in psychology are with counseling, which you don't necessarily do research with. You'll do practicum. You will learn how to be a therapist. There is one at Texas State. That's my Go Bobcats. And so they have a research-focused thesis master's program in psychology. And so some of those programs exist around the US. There's more often like data science, statistics, and things like that. It was helpful for me because I stayed in research and then I went off to a PhD after. A lot of times you earn a master's in your PhD. So a lot of times it's actually baked into the process where like your qualifying exams, are you earning a master's because you're doing a thesis? So I wouldn't say, I think it helped me in the sense that I had pretty mid grades in my bachelor's, but then I had a 4.0 in my master's because it was like subject matter that I was very good at. And so I think it helped strengthen a lot of parts of my application. I focused more on quantitative skills and things that I wanted. But I could have also probably done that in a post-bac. So it's really just about like, what do you think you need? I could have gotten experience elsewhere, but in my case, a master's did help me. But it's definitely not like you have to do crazy amounts of research experience beforehand. It's just like, if you feel like you're missing something, a master's, a post-bac, being a lab manager, working in a lab, volunteering or something, after you finish your degree can be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that when you consider what you might be getting out of a master's and the cost that is involved, so most master's programs are not, you are paying for them. You're whereas if you are just looking for a way to, for example, bolster research experience, you don't have to do a master's to do that. You can be a post-bac, you can be a lab manager, and you can get paid for that. So you are either paying in a master's program versus getting paid, and you're getting equivalent or if not a better experience. So again, like I said, I have very strong opinions about that. So that's my perspective. Again, unless, like Anna said, unless there is something that you think you are missing or you want to mitigate the potential impact that poor grades could have, and so that's my perspective. And again, you, in many programs, you get a master's along the way. So if you're vacillating between, should I get a master's or should I just take, do a post-bac or, work as a research administrator or lab manager, I would say the latter, especially if you can get paid for it.
I want to quickly answer this question from Jasmine. So because I got my master's, our program in particular was quite flexible with me about my required courses. So our degree is flexibly created so that you need 2 stats courses, but they don't specify which ones. Most people take intro stats 1 and 2, and that's their stats courses for their PhD. I was able to just choose whichever ones I wanted. So I actually took courses outside of our department in the Department of Statistics, since I already taken like 2 years of stats in my master's. I will be graduating with my PhD in 4 years, but it's not necessarily due to having a master's beforehand. I joined a lab that had just finished data collection for 2 years. And so I don't have to collect any data for my dissertation research. Data collection takes years. And if you're in animal research, it depends on so many other factors. So I wouldn't say a master's shortened my PhD at all, but a combination of factors meant that I could take more advanced courses right away. And my research, again, I can just analyze. I don't have to collect data. So that's a little bit of a unique experience. I wouldn't say most people finish in 4 years. It's usually 5 or 6.
Yeah, and I will say, so my lab is all animal research, and if you came in with a master's, you're not going to be leaving any sooner. You're going to come in, and your PhD is probably going to be 5 years. So it doesn't accelerate your ability to get through the program. So that's another consideration. Claudia has a question about personal statements. Again, we will get to that. We have so I want to talk about letters of rec, and then we can get to personal statements. So letters of recommendation, the questions were, let's see, what types of letters of recommendation would you suggest obtaining? What should recommenders touch on in recommendations? So you should try to get letters of recommendation from people that can really speak to that know you best as much as possible, and can speak to your qualities as a potential PhD student. What are your strengths? If you've been working, for example, in this person's lab, they can talk about what you've done, what unique contributions that you've made. If you've been involved in research, you should be able to easily get a letter of recommendation from those people. When you're asking for letters of recommendation, I would ask as early as possible. My biggest pet peeve is when I get requests for letters of recommendation when I have 2 weeks to write them, because I'm getting letters of recommendation from multiple people. So, and I really would like to do the best possible job, but it's hard to do it when you're only given a very small amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when I meet with students that have asked me for letters of recommendation, what I ask them is, what are some of the things that you would like me to highlight in the letter? Are there things that you're worried about in your application that I could potentially speak to? So when you're asking your letter writers, think about those things. And if there are things that you want to be highlighted, tell them. And what they do with that information is on them, because you won't see the letter, but use that as an opportunity for them to convey things that maybe you want to be congruent with your personal statement. And that's another thing. You want to make sure that what you're writing in your personal statement is congruent with what is being written in the letter. And the ways that you can do that is you can share your personal statement with your letter writers. And I always ask, when I'm writing letters of recommendation, please send me your CV and your personal statement, because I don't want to write something that is a mismatch with what they're putting that in their letter. So those are my thoughts. I know that, sometimes it's hard to find letter writers. Maybe you're working in someone's lab, and so you have one letter of recommendation. So again, a lot of this is strategy. So think about, between now and when you submit an application, making connections with other faculty members, making, if there's a class that you took with a professor that you really liked, perhaps reach out to them multiple times, and start making a list of potential letter writers. I would recommend, I wouldn't have like a graduate student or a postdoc write a letter of recommendation, because they do not come with the same amount of weight as those from, in an academic or professional standing. Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, like, there's a question, can my graduate student mentor for my honors thesis write me a letter of recommendation? It would better come from a professor. I mean, that's my perspective.
And that professor will probably reach out to that grad that you work with and be like, tell me about them. Because I do that because I work more with my students than my PI does, but the weight is stronger, like Caitlin said, coming from the PI. So I write the first draft of most letters of rec, send them to my advisor, and then they add professional embellishments, more like just like better language than that I have experience with at this point. So yeah, you can ask the grad, but I send the email simultaneously. I'll be like, hey, I'm looking for a letter of rec from this lab. Would y'all consider writing one for me? Because they're going to do that anyway.
So we can continue to talk about this, but to make sure that we get to the statement of purpose before 12. So and this it has to do with one of the questions. It was one more important than the other, and I think Anna answered it well, is that they're both important to make an overall impression. So what do you want to put in your personal statement? So I kind of have like four things that I look for. One is why. Like, why do you want to get a PhD? Why are you applying to a program, and why do you want to spend 4 to 5 to 6 years doing this? What is driving your decision? So kind of why. Not because, for example, like, this is what I do not like saying, not because the brain is fascinating. I will not read the rest of that, right? There needs to be a really deliberate and intentional argument for why you are applying for a PhD. I want to understand, I want to be able, from what you're writing, understand that you know what's involved in a doctoral program, that that, it's not, just taking classes, that you have, again, spent the time understanding what a graduate getting a PhD is, what's involved in the graduate program. It's, again, showing that you've given a lot of thought to this process. So why you want to do this, that you understand what's involved in the program. Providing evidence that you have the foundation to be able to tackle the program. And it doesn't mean that you have to have, you're not like Anna said earlier, you're going to be learning how to be a learner, right? But you need to have some of those skills to show that you can learn these, whatever you're going to be specializing in. So that's where using the research experience that you've gained, or whatever experience that you've gained, as evidence that you have what it takes, the skills that you can be successful in a program. And then finally, what is the fit, right? Like, why are you applying to University of Texas program, psychology program? Why are you interested in working with these faculty members? Not because, again, the brain is interesting, but because you have a deep-seated interest in this. I think, you do want to mention, I do think it's helpful to mention some of the folks that you're interested in working with. But on the other hand, I wouldn't make it like it's one person, because you may not be able to work with that one person. So showing that you're interested, that there's multiple people that you're interested in, and that, overall you have a good fit for that program. So again, why you want to pursue a PhD program, that you understand what's involved in the program. What evidence do you have to support that you have the skills to be successful in the program, and what is, describe the fits, like, why are you a good fit for the program and some of the faculty there. So those are my pieces of advice. And if Anna wants to chime in.
Yeah. I read personal statements all the time. The biggest thing I'll tell you is all the movies are wrong. All the TV shows, all the movies are wrong. It is not about your deep personal history. It's a professional essay and it's a narrative. And I blame Spanglish. Like they're very good movies, but the thing I see missing all the time is details. This person does not know you, and you do not want them to constantly be cross-referencing vague details in your personal statement with your CV or your resume. Like you need to be like, in like at least some details, like in 2014 or like in my sophomore year, I sought out this opportunity. My formula I usually give to students is like a broad paragraph. Hi, my name is this person. I'm applying to this program because I think it'll make me the best kind of scientist I want to be. I'm going to be detailing my experience in the paragraphs below. And then it's kind of like reads like a cover letter. I was interested in this question. I had this life experience. I took this class and went, whoa, why does the brain work that way? And so I sought out this experience. I sought out this skill set, and kind of demonstrating that you took initiative to become a researcher in this field, to become interested in it, to gain experience. And then I always have like a closing paragraph where I'm like, all of these experiences have led me to want more training in this area. Usually you have at least 2 professors listed on your application where I can say, this program has the type of resources I need. These professors in particular study methods that I think would be very beneficial to my overarching goal as a researcher. And, thank you for considering my application. So like, you want to create a cohesive narrative that's personable, but not too personal, that gives details, and that at the end, your reader is going, okay, yeah, this person wants to be a researcher. Like this person sought out these experiences. They gave me all the information. They made it super easy for me to read. Okay, I know broadly what they want. And, I think getting too specific can be a little hard because you never know exactly what you're going to study when you get into that lab. And so you want a little flexibility where you just be like, I want to learn these methods to, train myself in this way. But you want, sometimes getting too specific can actually hinder you. And also you can change in and out of your essays, like the last paragraph, and control and replace the names of those universities. So I think having a little bit of flexibility is really good. And have grad students, have professors read your personal statement, because those people who are writing your letters, like Caitlin said, often want to read your personal statement so they can give you feedback.
Yeah, I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't get feedback on your personal statement. And so with that in mind, don't write it the week or 2 before it's due. Spend the time, get feedback, get as much feedback as possible. And honestly, what Anna just described, is evidence that for me, if I read a statement like that, the way she outlined it, I would be like, I can totally understand why this person wants to get a PhD, right? So that's the point that I was trying to make, is like, I want to understand that this is a deliberate act, that you have thought about this, and that it's not just, I didn't know what to do once I graduated from college, so I'm going to apply to a PhD, because I've also heard that. This is what you want to do to get to like the next step, right? Whether that's running a research program, or whether that's working for working in industry, or whatever that might be. You identified as an important next step to do whatever, and that you have thought it through. And using Anna's formula, I think that's easily conveyed. If I'm left with, I don't understand why this person is interested in getting a PhD or is interested in this program, I think, you have not convinced them. So let's see, 19, I was just reading the chat, 19. Yeah, so I definitely read what Anna shares, because it's very helpful, and it'll help you kind of process everything that we've talked about. It is 12:01, so I
I
want
think
to,
we did great. We
Yeah.
are past just 1 minute. I'm going to stop recording for now.